Let's take a look at some information and charts on Zcash for Brave New Coin. Haven't talked about Zcash since December. I've never been a fan of Zcash. I will do my best to reserve my subjective bias and focus on the numbers for the duration of this video. Currently it's in the top 60, I believe, by market cap. More than Decred, a strong community and a Bitcoin adjacent mentality, but much weaker than Dash, Nem, AVAX, a bunch of other trash that just appeared this year. Tezos Maker, it's interesting how far Zcash has fallen in the list. Not that the list really means anything at the end of the day, but Rune. It's interesting what has taken off and what has not taken off. If we look at some basic information about Zcash, a few years old at this point, it's got shielded and unshielded transactions. It is optional privacy. Most of the time it's shut off on the exchange side of things for regulatory reasons. At the end of the day, that's the reason. It is a proof of work coin, 2 megabyte block ceiling, 1.25 minute block times, and currently 50% issued. ECC, the electric coin company, recently released a transparency report stating that they have 11.7 million in funds in a mix of USD and Zcash. They also stated in here that they have around 553,000 a month in burn as far as expenses are concerned. So if you're interested in reading more about that, you can check that out. I always like to check, is the coin worth more or less than the company responsible or the nonprofit or whatever it is, whatever the functionality of whoever collected the ICO funds, right? Is their treasury bigger than the worth of the coin? In this case, it is not. This isn't an EOS situation. Just looking, it's always good to take a look. If you haven't checked something out in a while, what have you missed in the past few months? So here's around 2020, they got a $120,000 grant from the Ethereum Foundation to work on some stuff. To me, none of this looks like it's going to move the needle. That's just an opinion, though. They have had a few releases over the past few months. I'll get to that when I look at the nodes. They do have a grayscale, Zcash, the coin, not ECC. They do have a grayscale fund, currently 75 million, kind of in the middle of the road, towards the higher end, really, in comparison to most of these altcoins, less than Horizon. I still don't know what Horizon is, don't care, but just interesting that some of this junk is even in here. Bigger than BAT, bigger than Chainlink, bigger than Decentraland, File Trust, LivePeer, some more junk, bigger than Stellar. So definitely towards the high end of AUM, at least for the grayscale products. If you look at the nodes, there are around 280 nodes according to Blockchair, most of which in Denmark and the United States, some in Canada, France, China, or I think that's China, right? CA. It's proof of work, so it's important to look. Are we decentralized? What is the hash rate? What is the what is the difficulty? Is mining falling off? That sort of thing. This all comes into the conversation when we're talking about decentralization versus centralization. It looks like most of the nodes are on 4.3. 4.4 was released recently, so there's some transition there, and then some of the nodes are behind the curve as far as upgrading, and then this one, not sure how 5.0 is already released, but looks like three of the nodes have already upgraded to 5.0. If you look at hash rate and difficulty, Zcash's hash rate since the block time adjustment in late 2019, so they adjusted block times, and if I slaughter any of this, it's because I haven't looked into it in a long time, but they adjusted block times, it adjusted the halving, or it didn't adjust the halving, I don't even know at this point. Doesn't really matter. Hash rate continues to go up, has continued to go up. Still looks okay. It's fallen off considerably in the past few months. It's potentially related to the miners in China getting walloped by a flood. I'm not super sure. Haven't really heard too much about Equihash, which are the ASICs used on Zcash. These are the ASICs. This is the profitability at 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So no new ASICs this year. The most recent ASIC was in 2020. And for a while they were talking about should we or shouldn't we attempt to increase the coin's ability to stave off ASICs by using a different algorithm. But it turns out they didn't really need to do that if no one's really producing a Equihash ASIC anymore. Now, that's kind of the best case for them to do nothing and just let ASICs do their thing. And based on this hash rate, you'd think there was an ASIC like covertly mining, but it doesn't appear like there was one. So I'm not really sure how this ended up playing out on the ASIC front, because it looks like they don't need to be anti-ASIC if there just isn't a big push for ASICs on the chain. Looking at the block distribution in the past, let's go past month, looks like it's pretty well split up, assuming that these are independent. I don't know that that's the case. This one is labeled as via BTC. It's potentially the case that a bunch of these addresses are the same miner. I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody's sure. So if you know about that, let me know in the comments. But again, we look at this because we're saying, is this a coin past the decentralization sniff test? Is it mined by one group of people that have control over the network, that sort of thing? So the initial pass says it looks okay. Now we get to the fun stuff, the coin metrics for Zcash relative to kind of everything else here. This is issuance annually, or annual inflation rate. And we have BTC and Monero at the bottom, sub 2%, around 1.5 for both. ETH around 4, Dash around 5.7, Zcash around 11.8 still. This was post-halving. And Grin at 44. So for me, the most difficult pill to swallow ever for holding Zcash, the whole narrative around holding Zcash, was always the inflation rate relative to everything else. Now, the retort has always been, this is just X coin in 2017. That's fine, but this isn't 2017 anymore. This is 2021. And if you're comparing and competing with something that has a 1%, 2%, 3% inflation rate, it's just hard to buy and hold that, right? Because you're getting diluted. You have to assume that the dilutions are outpacing the appreciation, right? If you're going to be holding this, that's just my mindset. Looking at transaction counts and average transaction values, transaction counts in the fill here for Zcash have essentially held flat. And it's important to note that I tell you these metrics do not include shielded transactions. They only include unshielded transactions. Although this may sound like there's a giant mystery behind how many more extra transactions are there, according to some stats that I'm able to pull up, it looks like overall shielded versus unshielded is extremely minimal. Looks like there are very few shielded transactions on any given day. Now, it's interesting that the coin metrics numbers don't match this at all. And it's potentially because, let's see, okay, it does go to 2021. So yeah, I don't know what's going on here as far as what transactions coin metrics counts and what transactions this website counts. But in any case, shielded transactions probably don't represent a massive percentage relative to the total transactions. That's the point I'm trying to make here. All in all, transactions relatively flat. I don't know why mean transaction values exploded here. This could be a minor rotation. I'm not really sure. I tried to look into it. I couldn't find anything. So if you are aware of what's going on, let me know in the comments below. But if we just zoom in to since 2019, you know, activity on the network hasn't done too much in the grand scheme of things. If we look at average transaction fees in the line and block size in the fill, block sizes have held relatively low, relatively stable. Fees are rising slightly in USD, mainly due to token appreciation, not necessarily rising on-chain fees, at least that I can tell. So I show this because it doesn't look like there's too much activity going on with the chain in general. NVT is at an all-time low. Active addresses basically a multi-year high. So again, this doesn't include shielded stuff. So this looks even better when you're accounting for shielded transactions. If anything, this is the most bearish chart, most bullish chart I can pull up if I'm looking at metrics, because this is exactly what we want to see. So this says, despite market cap rising over the past few months, activity, on-chain activity, has continued to increase relative to market cap. So it says that market cap has not increased fast enough relative to on-chain activity. If we look at MVRV, however, market cap versus realized cap, which again does not include shielded transactions, then we get a picture that says maybe this isn't so bullish, assuming a majority of the activities occurring on unshielded transactions. Because how this works is if market cap gets way ahead of realized value or how much is moving on chain, then MVRV goes way up. And on backtesting, it says, okay, if MVRV is in the line here, if it's above 2, if it's above 1.5, it's kind of been the top. So this chart looks toppy to me. This chart looks like it has more to go. So it's a bit of a give and take on those two. Now, if I'm taking inflation into account, transactions into account, I get a little less bullish. If we look at Google Trends, Google Trends look a bit mediocre, but definitely on the rise since September 2020. Basically a multi-year high, 3-year high, 2-year high, something like that. So there's slowly Zcash is gaining momentum on searches or Google activity, but nothing near the activity it got in 2016, 2017, or near 2018. Not even close. So you could read this and say, all right, there's a ton of upside left in price because Google Trends haven't topped yet. Hysteria hasn't reached Zcash yet. Flipping to technicals, we have the 5200 cross, Bitfinex long short data, VPVR volume, and RSI. So since mid-2020, 5200 has been crossed bullish. Since January, along with most other altcoins, Zcash has increased substantially, going from 62 to 230 currently. So as bearish as I might be just on the fundamentals for my own subjectivity, none of that has really mattered in the near term, so long as, since January, it's been bull city for everything, right? You can even see a bit of a inverted head and shoulders situation, consolidation here. It had this massive W. It survived March 2020. So there were plenty of technical reasons that all of altcoin land moved up. So it's hard, people, the Zcash people, here's my subjective bias showing, but the Zcash people may look at this and say, I told you guys, Zcash is going to moon. This is a great project. The fundamentals are amazing, halving, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, since January, everything's done well, right? Will this have another 2-year bear trend, right? That's what I'm thinking in the back of my head if I'm buying and holding this. So anyway, trend metrics look fine. VPVR looks fine. Path of least resistance looks up. Looks like up. It looks like it wants to retest all-time highs at this point. I mean, it looks like Monero in that it just wants to keep surging in the markup phase. ZQSD longs on Bitfinex are basically 99%. RSI hasn't quite hit a bearish divergence just yet. Volume definitely has. Volume's coming off on each high, so that's not what you want to see if you're bullish. But anyway, all this stuff looks good. Trend metrics look good. Cloud has been accurate since January. It's told you to long, add to your long, maybe close your long or add to your long, re-long here. It's been messy. It hasn't been clean, but trend-wise, it makes sense that we are where we are, considering we've had several support tests that have led to further continuation. And then looking at Zcash BTC on the 2-day, it is at the top of the pitchfork. This is a 3-year bearish pitchfork. It historically has never been higher in the past 2 years on this diagonal. So this is a big level. The next few weeks for ZBTC are critical. Will it break this level or will it get denied? If I'm just trading this pitchfork, I'm thinking I'm selling here. That's it. You buy here, you sell here. You trade this as a range, buy zone, sell zone. If it's in the pitchfork median line, which looks to be very real, price has hugged this several times throughout the past 3 years. If you're selling or short, you're hoping for a move at least to that median line. If you are bullish, if you're a Zcash maximalist, you're hoping for a break finally of this diagonal. And upside maybe 0.1, 0.15, definitely at least this local high. It's hard to really say. There hasn't really been a massive foothold on any of these levels over the past 3 years. But I'd imagine 0.15, definitely 0.3, I guess, is like the top based on this consolidation. But nothing super, super exciting here for me. Not exactly a bearish divergence just yet either. So this may have a bit to run. I don't know. It's not for me. I don't trade it. I pay very little attention to Zcash on my day-to-day. Lastly, I'll just mention the holistic ETH-BTC fund on Enzyme.finance, non-custodial portfolio management, transparent. You can see AUM, trades, allocation, deposits, withdrawals, no mins, no max. You can get in and out whenever you want. And we also have a managed DeFi portfolio, 15 to 20 DeFi coins, same spiel, all transparent. You can see everything and what happens trade-wise at any time. So that's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.